Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Smiths Falls Housing Advisory Committee for August 10th. I will call the meeting to order and open with our land acknowledgement. On August 10th, 2022, we acknowledge that the sacred land in which Smiths Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We're also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smiths Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, be mindful of generations to come. Okay. I make one amendment to the agenda. I'd like to add priority item B, inclusionary zoning, so we can continue, pick up on the discussion on that we left off at the last meeting. Any other amendments to the agenda? See any? Okay, ask for a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved by Vicky, second by Joanne. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving into our priority items. Additional residential unit guide. Aram. Carl, I'm going to ask you to take a moment to introduce Aram before she takes over the floor.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to introduce Aram Payroll-Violia. She's a summer student working with the planning department this summer, and she's an architecture student at Carleton University with a specialization in heritage conservation. And one of the important tasks that we gave her this summer was to create the additional residential unit guide to implement the zoning and official plan amendment policies that council adopted a couple of years ago, just to basically make it easier and support residents and developers to develop that and create a more of a user-friendly, visually appealing document that goes beyond just simply articulating the policy. So Aram has worked very hard on that, and we're delighted to be able to present that to the committee this afternoon. So Aram, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you. So I will be sharing my screen right now. So as you can see, this document is an additional residential unit guideline for the ARU bylaw of the town of Smiths Falls in order to provide a user-friendly document for citizens who wish to create additional residential unit in their properties, and then they can hand it to their builder. This document will entail information about building permit and zoning, a little bit about building requirements that they're gonna have for building their additional residential unit. So this is the first page or cover page of the document, and I will walk you through the whole thing. So the table of content, you can see the document is being separated into three main sections. One is the introduction, basically saying what is an additional residential unit, its benefits, and its different forms. Then it will go into its requirements. What are the requirements and how can they follow their zone specific requirements? And then finally going through the process of building permit and approvals. So the first page is defining what is an additional residential unit, which is literally something which will be added to the main residential unit. Now here you can see the abbreviations of each that will be carried on around the document. Here we have four types. Briefly, one is completely separate and detached. One could be attached to one part of the building. One could be attached and be built on the second floor, and then the last could be the basement. Next page, you can see some benefits of the additional residential unit. I'm not going to go through it all, but some of them could be increase the rental housing supply or creates a more diverse mix of housing types. So as you can see, this document is trying to convey the ideas mostly through graphics. And then here, a list of general requirements are being listed for the applicants. So it will be easier for them before coming to the town street or talking with the staff. They know what they should expect and make their application. So it will be even easier for the town to process it. So as you can see, some frequently asked questions have been placed throughout the document in order to address some questions that people might have, and they are placed relatively to the topic that the document is presenting. This page shortly go through the two main types of the ARU. So although we have 4 different categories, but then they are all under 2 main types. One could be within the main residential unit, and one could be detached from it. And each one of these will have different requirements in terms of setback, height, lot coverage, maximum unit size, or even front entrance, about parkings and such. So if they want more detail on what to include as part of their, what they need to follow in order to get a permit from the town, this is a very helpful diagram for them. This diagram and this page will determine where they can put and build their ARU on their lot. As you can see, 3 different scenarios in a completely single detached house, in a 2-building house, which they share kind of the same lot, and in a row house. You can see where they are allowed to put their additional residential unit in the blue box area. And again, some relatively frequently asked questions related to this topic are being placed in this page. In this page, it simplifies how they can find their zoning requirements in 4 different steps, and then guide them through which website they should go to. And then here on the right, there are some graphics telling them how they can go through the zoning bylaw and actually find their zoning specific requirements easily. So here the process of getting a permit is starts in the document. Here are just telling them what can they do if they actually don't meet the zoning requirements, and the simple answer would be to do a minor variance. And next it goes to the building permit information. These are basically a list of information needed, documents, I would say, needed for them in order to apply if they need a building permit. And then next, it showcases the final approval process. And then you can see they are color coded, telling them the green ones are the steps that the applicant is responsible for, and the blue ones saying these are the steps that the town needs to go through in order to give them the final approval permit. And then finally, I just concluded the document with questions that are mostly related to the building department. And that concludes the additional residential unit guideline.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Aron. That's first glance very comprehensive, but also it flows well and is very user-friendly, which I think is something we were aiming for. Really appreciate your effort here. I'm gonna open it up for, maybe you can stop sharing the screen and we'll open up for questions, please. Yes, Joanne?
Is there an incentive to have like where there is some sort of geared to income rental fees? Is that part of this application, like an incentive? So if I put in an addition to my house and I get some support, would I would have to rent it to somebody that is on a fixed income? Like sometimes when I have heard of people in like contractors being told that you have to have so many designated units that are going to be geared to income or for low income. So is that something that is also going to be in that proposal?
So great question, Joanne, and I'll let Carl provide an answer.
Thank you. So the zoning provisions that Aram is capturing here relate just to the land use. So the use of the additional residential unit or the detached additional residential unit. One other project that the town is working on is a community improvement plan, and that is and part of that community improvement plan investigates a series of incentives to create to provide either create additional residential units or as part of larger development applications, incent the creation of a number of affordable housing units subject to criteria and definitions that are established by that would be established by council, and the developer would be obligated to meet those in order to obtain, say, a tax abatement or some other sort of incentive to create these units. The draft plan is looking at the draft community improvement plan. Again, has not been approved by council, but is investigating creating incentives to allow the creation of additional residential units and support residents who wish to do that.
So that is Carl, we can get to the presentation a little bit later in the agenda that will outline further details on that. So will be a council decision, ultimately, Joanne, to be able to provide incentives, and some municipalities have. So it'll be a good discussion. Sam?
Yeah, hi. I don't have a question, Aram, about the guide, but I just wanted to say kudos. I think it's beautifully done. As someone who really gets easily confused about the process of things and trying to figure out what can be sometimes complicated steps to take, I think this is just a really beautifully laid out guide. It's super clear. I get it. I know exactly how I would go about things if I had to do it. So thanks. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the key drivers here is by helping and enabling secondary units, we are providing a greater supply of rental stock, perhaps affordable or even potentially rent geared to income. But furthermore, it is an opportunity for homeowners, especially maybe new homeowners, to be able to get some rental income to help assist with their ability to buy a home. And as the cost of living rises, as the cost of homes rise, especially within our community, this can make the difference between someone being able to actually purchase their own home and potentially not being able to do so. So I think there's a lot of merits to this policy and to the town encouraging and potentially even incentivizing the development of ARUs.
I did just find a question.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
What will become of this guide now? Because I think, like, how will we advertise it? How will we get it out there? Because I think because it is so like easily laid out, it really might spark some people to think about doing this when they might not have considered it before, because it looks like, hey, this isn't so daunting. I could do this.
Carl, do you want to handle that?
Sure, and it would be a real shame if all of Aram's work was left to sit on a shelf and not get used. So I think from our perspective, ultimately, what we're trying to do with creating this document is the document doesn't create policy, but what we're trying to do is promote the policy that was created and give in more, I guess, layman's terms, give that bit of encouragement and sort of the one size fits all non-technical advice on how to proceed. So we would certainly be that's one of the things we're looking at our end, is how do we make this live. I would certainly expect to see it on our website, available at the front for people who are interested in picking that up. And also we get inquiries on a regular basis from residents, from developers, who are sort of floating this idea, and this would be a great thing to send to them. So we're hoping to make it sort of live and formal within the next within the next couple of days, but from our end, we're still working on where exactly it's going to go as of right, while making sure that staff are available to send it out whenever inquiries come in.
Any other questions or comments? One thing I think that Carl would also make sense is potentially the possibility of holding a workshop sometime, or maybe a couple workshops through a year that could invite homeowners and perhaps even getting contractors involved and a chief building official to help people understand more details on how possible this is and how it could work, and even the possibility of bringing in a mortgage lender in so they can help explain to homeowners how they can leverage the equity in their home in order to do so. So in my mind, it's everything we can do that makes it easier will generate greater results. And I think the results are pretty obvious once they are in place. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Aram. Great work. It's nice. I know you'll be moving on after the summer, but you'll leave a legacy of success that will lead to, in my mind, the further additional ARUs in town.
Thank you, everyone.
All the best. Okay, so moving on, I wanted to have a brief discussion, picking up where we left off in our last meeting with regards to inclusionary zoning. And we've touched base on this before, and we know that current provincial regulations would not allow us to have an inclusionary zoning bylaw, which would ultimately compel developers to have a certain number of affordable units within a development. And we did have a discussion regarding public transit, and I think that's something that I think, as I mentioned last time, I think the next council will probably delve fairly deeply into. But in the meantime, I'm hoping this committee is willing to support a resolution recommending that our council formulate a resolution asking the province to reconsider the inclusionary zoning regulations that prohibit smaller municipalities from participating in such a bylaw or having such a bylaw based on a requirement for major public transit. So I've asked Carrie to simply just draft a brief resolution. And Carrie, if you've got that to share, I'd like to start a discussion around it.
Sorry, Mayor Panko. No, I by the time I got your message, we had already been starting the, just preparing to start this meeting. So I don't have anything drafted. However, Carl has noted that perhaps the three of us, you and him and I, could sit down, as I guess there's many layers to this to kind of hash out what our request would be and bring back kind of a draft proposal for the next meeting, or the next HAC meeting in 2 weeks. And at that point, I don't think we have a committee of the whole before that date. And we have August 22nd. But I think we might be having a special meeting shortly after that, Mayor Panko, if that's okay with you. Okay. I don't know if Carl has anything more to add to that, but
unless for committee's consensus, or go ahead, Carl, first.
Yes, unfortunately, I wasn't at the last housing committee meeting, but I reviewed the minutes, and it looked like it was a phenomenal discussion, just that sort of touched upon how housing affordability and transportation are all critically linked with each other, and certainly I welcome that conversation on how do we approach this, and do we look any further than just simply the limitations that the Planning Act prescribes, or is there anything else that can fit within the context of Smith Falls? So certainly, with subject to the committee's direction and a meeting with Director Costello and Mayor Pankow, that's something that we can sort of dive into a little bit deeply on our end, and then come back to you with some more information. Okay.
Well, initially I was thinking we could simply have a resolution of support that we would have a resolution drafted and go to council. But let's leave it, I think, where we'll work at producing a more detailed resolution based on current regulations and limitations, and then bring it back here for endorsement before it goes to council. Vicki?
So instead of building public transportation or implementing it, which is desperate, and many residents will tell you that, we're going to supersede it by asking the government, which does not like to do anything for anybody, if they would, you know, look past that limitation that we need. Perhaps it's there for a reason, is my thoughts.
Well, thanks, Megan. And I don't think, not to supersede, but I think both initiatives can move forward. But I think they can move forward separately. In other words, the province will allow smaller municipalities that don't have public transit to move ahead with an inclusionary zoning bylaw that can help ensure that this council here and elsewhere could have that autonomy and choice to make without having to have a requirement for public transit. Certainly, a discussion for public transit has merit, and that may be something that the next council decides on, but it's also something that may take some time to implement. So I'd rather try to separate the two and to seek an opportunity for the town to bring in its own bylaw if the next council decides to do so. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. We'll bring it back in a couple of weeks. Okay, moving on with our agenda, the Dillon Consulting presentation. Carl.
Carl, are you there? If you could, we're on correspondence item. It was an item deferred from July 20th, the Dillon Consulting presentation.
Okay, just give me a moment, Carrie. Yes, so thank you. This is, I'll just briefly overview what our consultants have been working on so far with respect to the community improvement plan. So as the committee is aware, we've retained Dillon Consulting to assist us on developing a new CIP, part of which is going to replace the existing facade and downtown community improvement plan, but also more broadly touch upon, look at expanding the boundaries of support for as it relates to housing and housing accessibility and brownfield development to the entire town. So the report that they presented on June 27th summarized the work that they've done to date. Should I screen share or?
Yeah, especially
okay.
the sections that focus primarily on attainable housing, of course.
Certainly. Just one moment, please. Can everyone see here?
Yes.
Okay. So the report, they introduced the town staff as well as our consultants who are working on it. They summarized what a community improvement plan is. That's certainly we've gone over that a few times, and they worked on the sort of focused on highlighted the key focus areas of the CIP. That one is, of course, brownfield development, and there is potentially a huge ability and a huge source of land potentially for to construct housing and looking at incentives to facilitate and sort of reimburse developers for some of the work that they would need to take to clean up contaminated sites. That contaminated sites require a lot of, depending on the historic land use, they typically require a lot of additional work and research before they can be, and potentially remediation before they can be cleaned up and primed for development. Ultimately, it's in nobody's best interest for a contaminated site to sit untouched. So we're looking at broadening our incentive programs for brownfield development that may have a housing impact. There is, of course, we're looking at the facade and the building stock, commercial building stock downtown that focuses in the current CIP. We're proposing to continue. We're looking at incentive programs to support accessibility enhancements throughout the town, not just the downtown, and housing, of course. And again, as Mayor had indicated, we are early in the process of creating creating the policies and creating the financial incentive packages, and a draft will be presented to the council in the coming week or a month or so. So right now, we have the current community improvement plan only looks at the downtown area, and we're looking at basically that restricted area for facade and building rehabilitation grants, but looking more broadly throughout the town for a couple of these other more universal requirements. So the presentation looked at some of the boundary options here. It outlined what a community improvement plan can do, and then how it would work. And they're intending to, based on their experience in working with other municipalities, create a suite of incentive programs, including looking at tax abatements, grants, potentially loans, and other tools to ultimately guide development that enhances the community in a way that's identified here. So at this point, we're sort of in the middle of the process right now. They've met with staff since this meeting in June, just to go over some of the financial packages. We've provided feedback, and they're working on that. So hopefully within the coming weeks or month or so, they'll come back with something that's ready to be taken to council for direction. And just to highlight, council has identified the community improvement plan as something that they're looking for to get completed this term. Obviously, funding decisions will be at subject to the next council, but at this point, we're looking to have the policy in place. So this is an accelerated project here. So we just went over the June presentation, summarized where we're at in the process, and what the final steps are. Unfortunately, the consultation and outreach we've had to the public and agencies was not terribly well attended, and that's not all that surprising. But we also had interviews with recipients of the current community improvement plan, those who've gone through the process, and we've identified some of the applicants for Dillon Consulting to interview, and we didn't just identify those who've had good processes. We wanted to select those who've had challenges through the CAP process, so they can give a very candid overview of what their experiences were and what we can do differently and how we can make a more effective, efficient, and easier to process system to give everybody a little bit of certainty. Our consultants have also reviewed other community improvement plans in other municipalities. They looked at Belleville, Cobourg, and as well as a plan that they're working on in Carleton Place, and just looked at what sort of tools are available and what others are doing. They identified opportunities, gaps, and constraints for our current and future community improvement plan, and what can be a real focus area for the next steps. So they looked at brownfield, they looked at facade, they looked at, of course, housing. They offered a very preliminary suite of recommendations on financial incentive strategies. So just some of the tools that are available to us. I think there's been a lot of discussion on, for instance, that secondary, the additional residential unit grant, and a lot of municipalities are offering small, in the range of $5,000 to assist in the creation of those units. The challenge is, from my understanding, is there has not been a lot of uptake. That's not a huge incentive in terms of the overall costs of the project. So we are looking at potentially topping that up for larger renos, but ultimately we would need to, and council would need to balance how they want to prioritize funding to implement the CIP. And there's another suite of recommended incentive programs as well through their proposal, and these will get modified. These will get and a final version or a draft version will be presented to council in the next little while. The consultants are also proposing a municipal leadership strategy, outlining a few things the town itself can do to sort of set the stage and provide a good example. And I'm happy to see that a number of the items that are on this list of investments we've already done recently or are in the process of doing or will be starting shortly. So we have a pretty we're doing some of these good things already. So that's just a quick overview of Dillon Consulting's presentation to council at the end of July, sort of updating where we're at with the community improvement plan. And the next step in that process, again, we will be presenting some preliminary recommendations to council for direction and feedback in the coming several weeks, hopefully in the month of September. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Carl. Any questions or comments? Lorraine.
No, I just have one, Carl. We presently have a sum of money that we spend yearly on our CIP, and many people have taken advantage of that to do facade improvements and so forth. If we're moving to a number of different types of CIP, how will we fund it? Like, will we have a number of funded amounts that will be designated for certain things? Or how do you see that working?
Right, Carl.
So that's an excellent question, Councillor. And I think the challenge we have is all of these put together, if they proceed, could be a lot of big ticket items that could have a pretty substantial budgetary impact, potentially exceeding the $50,000 that we've often budgeted most years for the CIP. So obviously there will need to be there will be a proposed budget allocation that will be presented to council at the budget time, and certainly that'll be considered in conjunction with all of the other budget options. But one of the what the developers are also proposing is just a system of I guess that they're calling it a bank of light switches, where in any given year, council can decide which of these programs are going to be in effect this year. So for instance, if we wanted to do a surge of additional residential unit policies, we turn that switch on, fund that, strongly support that, and then perhaps in a future year, we want to focus on facade or want to focus on a different program. So there's positives and minuses about how we want to proceed, but the intent is to create that flexibility that at least allows us to pick and choose which ones we fund in any given year, and allow us to change that if we want to in a given year without having to go into amending the CIP. So certainly there will be a significant budget. It's fair to say there will be a fairly significant budget impact, and that's going to be we may be looking at sort of customizing which applications or which programs, which incentive packages we're going to be offering. Additionally, with respect to tax increments, that wouldn't be something where it's funding something out of an existing budget, but it's revenues that we will not be realizing over a number of years. So that would be treated a little bit differently than, say, a grant, which is what we've mostly been doing with the current CIPs.
Thanks, Carl. Vicki?
How much is being allocated to businesses for facades?
The current, go ahead, Carl.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. In the last number of years, we've been through the budget process, we've been allocating roughly $50,000 per year for the community improvement plan, and most of that is for interior and exterior renovations to buildings in the downtown core. There's a few other programs, building and planning fee rebates, but those aren't a very big ticket item in the current CIP. But that's been really the priority of the current community improvement plan, because when it was created, the planning that went into that identified that the downtown really needed help and really needed incentives. So that's why the priority and focus was on the downtown core in the current CIP.
Well,
I mean, specifically, can a business apply for maximum to redo their facade?
Right, Carl.
Under the current CIP, the maximum that we can give them a grant of up to $10,000, representing 50% of the cost, representing a maximum of 50% of the cost of the exterior renovations. So if the exterior renovations cost a total of $20,000, then we can grant them $10,000 for that. And that's the maximum under the current community improvement plan.
And actually the biggest award we've given under the planning and building fee section would be to Cambridge Community Support for the affordable housing development of 44 Chambers. I mean, it was $10,000 or $12,000, which was the maximum we could contribute under that program. So fortunately, that.
What about when council gave more money to the new restaurant going up in the old KFC building? How much was that allocated?
I'm not sure if Carl, if you have that handy, but it's public information. Yeah.
Yep, no, that's it. It certainly is public information. That was granted the maximum available under the existing program too for interior renovations. So they only got a grant of they only got the interior renovations, not the exterior, and there was a repayable or a forgivable loan of $40,000 for that. So the CIP committee recommended and council supported the maximum available for that, recognizing and the rationale behind the CIP committee's recommendation there is that this was the CIP here was intended to accommodate the sort of the refurbishment of an otherwise derelict, difficult to use commercial building and bring that back into life. And that was so that grant was made in accordance with the current CIP.
Thank you. And Joanne, did you have your hand up?
I did, but Carl answered it that the priority was the center town, and then well, with future, you'll look at the boundaries. But my understanding is that you're focusing on the center town, trying to clean up and get things going in the center town. If I'm getting correctly what Carl just mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Yes, and just to further to Vicky's question, there are the exterior renovation, so the facade improvement, that's a maximum of the $10,000, but the interior renovations, the maximum for a forgivable loan there of up to $40,000. But Joanne's absolutely correct. That has been the focus of the current CIP, and that we're proposing to retain downtown specific facade improvements. There's certainly value in that, but we're not just looking at that. We're casting the net wider to identify community improvement needs throughout the town, especially as it relates to housing and brownfield development.
Yeah, and affordable housing CIP came out of the work of the Housing Task Force, of course, with our committee responsible for implementing that. We made a recommendation to council to follow through on the development of affordable housing CIP as soon as possible, and this is a report back that progress is being made. Okay, we have one last item on our agenda, the resolution from Brantford, I believe it was. Yes, from the city of Brantford. Carrie, do you want to put that up if you can, please?
I certainly can.
This really speaks to concern from the city of Brantford that large business, major corporations, potentially foreign ownership corporations are buying up single family homes in certainly in their municipality in Ontario. Potentially also, but I guess a possible consideration is some degree of money laundering involved. And I know from reports I've seen or heard in the news that major housing corporations, some with foreign ownership, do own tens of thousands of homes, even just in the GTHA area. And it does obviously limit the supply of single family homes for individuals and probably pushes prices up. So this resolution was circulated to all municipalities in Ontario with a request that it be further endorsed. So I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it. But we'll open up for discussion and see if there's an interest in forwarding this to council for support.
So as a note, Chair Panko, I did follow up with with our police chief, and he just wanted to know. He noted that this hasn't been an issue in Smiths Falls, but recognized that it has been an issue in some of the larger centers in Ontario, but it has not been an issue for Smiths Falls.
Any comments or Vicky?
It kind of brings it an issue to Smiths Falls because people from Toronto and other places where this is happening are forced to move to other municipalities where it's not happening. If we can't do anything about Airbnb, I certainly want to do something about this before this takes over our town as well. So I do support.
Okay, thank you. And to your point, Vicky, I mean, it may not be an issue today, but the day could come when major corporations are buying up properties in town and limiting supply and forcing up prices and controlling increase in rents because they have a greater control of the housing supply. So I think your point is very well taken. Other comments? So if you can reduce, lower it. And so I think is there a consensus that we would like council to support this resolution? See a motion of support. Vicky, seconded by Courtney. All in favor? Okay, thank you. That'll go forward to council. Okay, we've wrapped our agenda up quite quickly today. Any further comments before we wrap up and plan for a meeting like 2 weeks down the road? Yes, Joanne?
I just want clarification. What you, Carl, and Carrie are going to be looking into is addressing a letter to the provincial to give us some leeway to providing more residential areas without having a transportation attached to it. Is that
Yeah, somewhat. Essentially, we'll look into the details of the current regulations. And we will ask for this committee and then council to support a resolution requesting the province reconsider the current rules that essentially prohibit small municipalities from bringing in an inclusionary zoning bylaw, which would ultimately require developers to include affordable units in every development, maybe at 15% of the units be affordable as an example. So we'll work on the wording and the details based on what the current regulations say and what we think is most suitable for our community, and then come back here so we can discuss it and make a recommendation to council.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarity to make sure that I understood.
No problem. Okay, I'll ask for motion for adjournment. Moved by Vicky, seconded by Joanne. All in favor? Thanks everyone for all your time today. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.